Alright, getting back to our roots with this one, folks. So, in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, when you are telling someone about your character, what are the first things you communicate? Do it, right now. Tell me about your character, except stop, I'm talking, this is my video. So, I'll bet it was race and class. From one point of view, this makes a lot of sense, because when you create a character, you are generally thinking in mechanical terms, and race and class define the mechanics. But does that really matter? When you're trying to get across that time your character used major illusion to trick a vampire into thinking the sun was coming out, and it totally was awesome and it changed the shape of the battle, does it really matter if your spells were prepared from a spellbook like a wizard, or if they came from within like a sorcerer? When talking about the time you challenged a troll to a wrestling competition and won, does it matter if your hit dice is a d10 or a d12? It makes sense that we use these terms, we're not stupid for doing it, but they're usually completely unnecessary and we can do better. If you were trying to get across something about your character's personality, their beliefs, their, for lack of a better word, character, you might start talking about alignment, and now that's an interesting one. I've played a lot of Dungeons & Dragons, and I've always found alignment to be more trouble than it's worth. Good, evil, lawful, chaotic. These terms have no small amount of controversy around them. Go to any place where D&D is talked about and ask if someone who follows not the law of the land, but their own internal code is lawful or not, and you can get a dose of that controversy yourself. But no, not only is the framework confusing, it also doesn't really delineate things very clearly to people. Your Dragonborn sorcerer, what's the difference between them being lawful good and neutral good? Is that difference so important? Does it come up so often that it should be the thing we communicate first when talking about the character of our characters? This is the first video in a series on the color pie in Magic the Gathering as it pertains to heroism. So the color pie is an enduring and fascinating 5-way split that the Magic card game uses. Each color has not only its own unique mechanics within the game, but its own unique philosophy and a view on the philosophy of the other 4 colors. I think you'll find that as a framework, not only is it better for communicating your character conveniently, but it's also a useful tool in building characters, developing them, and understanding at a glance how they'll feel about the various people and ideas they encounter in-game. I've been using it for years, as have most of my players, and we find it works wonders in many different RPG systems across many different contexts. You owe it to yourself to at least give it a try, and if you want to, hey, you are in the right place. Congratulations. So, very simply, here are the 5 colors. You can skip to this time if you're already familiar with the system. White is all about peace through structure. It values community, law, and order. It despises chaos, anarchy, evil, and exploitation. Blue is all about perfection through knowledge. It values contemplation, planning, self-improvement, and despises rash action, emotional thinking, tradition, and essentialism. Black is all about satisfaction through opportunity. It values power, independence, and ability. It despises restrictions, fate, and feeling impotent. Red is all about freedom through action. It values doing what it feels like, expressing itself, and giving in to passion. It hates restrictions on freedom, like placing thinking over emotions, over-planning, and being expected to make sacrifices for others. Green is all about wisdom through acceptance. It values finding your place in a wider ecosystem, being true to yourself, and being the best version of that self you can be. And it despises selfish perversion of the natural, wicked individualism, and the folly of believing that you can make yourself into being whatever you'd like to be. The colors are friends with those beside them and enemies with those opposite. White, for example, finds common ground with green in community and collectivism, and finds common ground with blue in order and structure, but it can't abide by black's selfishness or red's chaotic tendencies. And with all that preamble out of the way, let's look at white in more detail. You'll notice that each of the 5 enemy pairs has something they disagree on. We can understand why better through these disagreements. Black and white disagree on why you should live your life. White thinks it's best to live in service of others, the community, and black says it's best to live in service of the self, what you want. White says that peace and order are worth restricting freedoms for, and red says that rules that prevent true expression are unjust and should be opposed. If your hero leans into white, they generally value community thinking over selfish thinking, and social order over chaos. It doesn't have to always be 100% true in every instance, and it probably shouldn't be, but in general your white character should be focused on the public good and maintaining order. You'll notice that these 2 axes are very similar to the law versus chaos and the good versus evil distinctions we were making earlier. And And that's why white's such a good starting point to transition from the old alignment system into this new one. The archetypal white hero is lawful good. Now, notice there's still a near infinite variation of characters within this archetype. Would your character risk the life of one, try and save 5 lives? I mean, if they had to choose, would they save the local priest, who does much good every year? Or 5 ordinary men and women who are farm laborers? Being core white means orientating yourself in the general sense toward doing good for others and maintaining order. But there are a lot of shades of good and a lot of shades of order. A white character could even, maybe, in good conscience, accept a bribe from an evil villain in order to allow the villain to continue to do evil. With this wealth, I can buy equipment that will allow me to do further good, they might think, and they might be right. It doesn't feel very traditionally white, but it is, I think, allowed within the confines of a white character. A good example of a traditional white character in popular culture is Captain America, Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers wants to help people around him, and he wants to uphold the order that surrounds him, too. When saving the people of New York, he works within the framework of the police, doing their best efforts to coordinate people to safety. Lawful good, not chaotic good. While it gets more complicated later, I think in the confines of that movie, he is archetypal mono-white. So, right now you might be thinking how much utility this system really has. For white at least, it seems it doesn't really offer that much more than just saying lawful good. But most people aren't just one color. Imagine for a moment that our archetypal white character were to lean in the direction of an other color. Blue is all about perfecting oneself, creating plans, schemes, and systems. So a white character leaning into blue might really emphasize their love of order. They might choose to save 1 priest over 5 farm laborers, because even though, I'm told, 5 is a greater number than 1, the community, the structure, the order, society loses more if the priest dies than if the 5 farmers die. Such a character would really enjoy planning and might hate being in situations that were new or required quick judgment. They might enjoy researching every engagement before it happens so they can prepare just the perfect spell or bring just the perfect piece of equipment. They become a little less concerned with a hatred of selfishness. Blue is friends with black after all, and they become a little bit more concerned with criminals, rebels, and anyone who opposes order. In short, anyone who embodies blue and white's shared enemy, red. Whilst a white character can definitely ally themselves with freedom fighters or revolutionaries, a blue-white character might have more reservations about that. If you're having trouble thinking of a character like this, hold in your mind for a moment Jean-Luc Picard. Jean-Luc was a good man with deep-seated beliefs in the good of the Federation, helping his fellow man, coming together in solidarity, all that good jazz. But he was also a believer in the Prime Directive, the rule at the heart of the Federation's exploration efforts, to not interfere with the internal and natural development of other civilizations. Even when other civilizations are in trouble, even when they might die, heck, even when Picard and all his people might die, he cannot and will not violate the Prime Directive. I mean, he does, all the time. According to the Stack Exchange thread, which I had to use because I actually haven't seen the show, I'm a DS9 boy myself, he's violated it no less than 14 times. But on the whole, Picard allows this idea, this structure, this code of best practice to supersede any other concern. He would not topple an unjust authoritarian state that is subjugating its people. He would not prevent a society with no idea what they were doing from destroying all their natural resources of their planet. He wouldn't even prevent an entire planet full of people from uploading all their brains into a computer even if he knew that that process wouldn't work and was just going to kill them. The right for people to decide for themselves how to be comes first. What matters is the rule. Changing lanes completely then, what about white leaning into green? We abandon blue's predilection with hyper-detailed structures and planning, and lean more into a general community kind of organization. White-green is about knowing your place in wider systems, caring about everyone in the community, and selfless self-sacrifice. The white-green hero is likely to save the 5 laborers over the 1 priest, because 5 is 5, 1 is 1, and it's together that we find our real strength. You might find a white-green player subverting more rules, especially if the rules are unjust, as long as it helps the common man. On a personal note, nowadays when I'm going for straight heroism, this is the kind of hero I like to play. I've got many aspirations to try and get a fantasy version of the Diggers up and running. And for a cultural example of this hero, you can think of Simba from Lion King. He ran away from his responsibilities and fear early on, leaning into Red's desire to be free of wrongdoing and moral judgment. But the lesson he learns in the film is to accept his place in society and topple the unjust king for the benefit of everyone, changing into a wholly good white-green person. Of course, allied pairs are only half the story. When white teams up with its enemies, black and red, there is some very interesting characters that can result. A white-leaning red character is someone who's found a sort of balance between chaos and law. That can look a lot of different ways. It can look like chaotically reaching for structure, or orderly reaching for chaos, or even finding some sort of harmony between the two. Red-white heroes are often rebels, turning to chaotic means to undermine unjust systems, but doing it with community benefit foremost in mind. This is where chaotic good sits for me. My first character I ever played, which was 7 or 8 years ago now, Daxter O'Callaghan, was a white-red character. Uninterested in laws or rules, uninterested in systems, Dax would use illusion magic and trickery to steal money from those he thought had too much, but was always insistent on helping the defenseless, and leaving each place the party came across better than how they found it. One of my favourite examples of a white-red character in popular fiction is Carmalita Fox from the Sly Cooper games. A little bit too invested in catching thieves and creating order, Carmelita balances passion and chaotic impulsive means, with a white end goal of punishing those who break the rules of society. But frequently, it's unclear if she wanted those thieves in jail because she thought that's where they should be, or if it was a personal, emotional vendetta that drove her, and at other times, it was embarrassingly clear it was the latter. Fun fact, Magic's heroic mechanic is primarily in red and white, which just makes a lot of sense to me. The last pair is one of the weirder ones in all the color pie. White leaning into black. Selflessness with a hint of selfishness. English's strategy for turning adjectives into nouns doesn't do those words any justice. But anyway, out of all the color pairs, this could be one of the hardest ones to get a coherent identity for. I mean, black and white seem like such opposites, but in reality, they do have a lot more in common than you might expect. Black and white do both like religion. In Magic the Gathering, they have the highest proportion of clerics, and in D&D, the lawful black cleric of an evil religion is the kind of counterpart to the white cleric of a good one. A white hero with a splash of black is still going to care about order and community, but they might be a bit more mercenary about it. They might be happy to break certain rules when it suits them, to get what needs to be done. White can be burdened with an idealistic yearning for perfection, and black's pragmatism serves as a nice counterbalance that can create a hero ruthlessly pursuing good. An interesting example of this is from the show Avatar: The Last Airbender. Prince Zuko. Zuko was often mischaracterized as a red character because of fire, but really all Zuko ever wanted was to fit into his people's culture and fulfill his role in his family. He was always soft, always kind, always concerned with what people thought and about the lives of the common soldiers of his kingdom. White to the core. It was the ruthless and toxic culture he was a part of, and his desperate desire to rejoin it, that forced the black into his personality. And it was that black that allowed him to so effectively shift his ideology when his old one wasn't working out for him. Oh, whoops. I guess that was spoilers for a pretty great TV show, but hey, you should watch that pretty great TV show. It will make you a better world builder and a better dungeon master. Of course, we aren't limited to 2 color characters. I recommend starting there, but there's a lot of interesting variation when you get to a 3rd color. Just as an example, Daxter O'Callaghan, my first PC I mentioned earlier, was definitely white-red, but he was caught between 2 different forces. As a wizard, he wanted to learn, to sequester himself away sometimes, and to find libraries, cool pieces of information like that. He wanted to be a hero librarian, that's what was cool to him. I mean, Daxter O'Callaghan was also a very thinly veiled version of myself at the time, and I did want to be a hero librarian. It was a good aesthetic for me. Anyway. He was white-red, threatening to become blue. But the world that Daxter lived in was often cruel, capricious, and unfair. Nefarious forces hurt people all the time, and worse, manipulated them into fighting and hurting each other. Daxter was left with decision after decision that ended with him crossing moral boundary after moral boundary. The white-red was core, sure, but was he going to fall into blue or black? One evening, as our DM took a break to go prepare for the next session, us players took a walk around my hometown. It was late into the night, probably 2 or 3 in the morning, and we took a walk by the local boardwalk. And as we walked, we spoke in character. This was a kind of transformative experience for me, as we realized that, as a group, to effect the kind of change we wanted to see in the world, we'd have to do some dangerous things that could have a lot of collateral damage. The tension inside Daxter resolved, and he became a white, red, black person, eager to make the world a better place for everyone, to smash every unjust hierarchy, and do all of it at any cost. The ways that a character with 2 colors can evolve into a 3rd are too numerous to list, but since Daxter, I have built each character out of 2 core colors, and used the tension of which of the remaining colors the character was going to incorporate as they developed to guide my roleplay. It's a very rewarding and natural way to think about development, instead of an arc that you're forcing onto your character from outside the game, you just keep these options in your mind as you see what effects the world your character lives in and the people in it might have on them. You might even lose whole colors as things that used to be important to your character stop being so important, or as they change their mind on big issues. But the big advantage of all this isn't even having a natural way to evolve your character believably within the fiction. It's having some clear ideas you can use to make snap judgments on your character's behalf. Do you help the thief with a heart of gold? If you're white-blue, probably not. They broke the rules, and you think the rules are important. Do you save the terrible prince who's allowed his peasants to starve? I mean, if you're white-black, probably not. He was terrible for the people, and things are better with him gone. Unless, perhaps, he can make it worth your while? Keeping a whole person in your head at all times can be tricky. I mean, PlayStation 4s can't even have a PlayStation 1 in their virtual memory. How can you be expected to have a whole damn person in your brain? I mean, it's a big brain, I'm sure, but we all have our limits. If you keep the colors of your character at the forefront of your mind, you always know the important fundamentals they're likely to use to make decisions. Anyway, folks, this ran a little bit long. In this video, we talked about the 5 colors of magic, zoomed in on white, looked at the 4 different color pairs your hero could be composed of, with some fun pop culture examples, discussed briefly how you can grow that character into a 3rd color, and emphasized the system's utility in making decisions. And then I summarized the whole thing for you like my buddy Talaris told me to. Am I doing it right, pal? Is this what you wanted? I hope so. If you want to give me pointers on how to improve the quality of these videos, or tell me that you like the weird way my accent sounds, you can pop over to our Discord, where we're currently involved in a massive multiplayer game of Microscope, the asynchronously collaborative world-building RPG. It is seditious as hell, and you should definitely join in. You could subscribe if you want to make me smile. Golly, I love watching that number go up. Later this week, there'll be a video on blue heroes, folks. Yeah. Safe home.